Welcome to Paranormal M, your portal to the world beyond. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to catch every haunting tale we share. Experience the thrill of the supernatural. I heard a man crying near the washroom. 2024 incident. I am Jay Islari, a male 26. I always sleep late at night, and on that day it was around 1 or maybe 1:30 a.m., I guess. I was watching a series amidst I felt the urge to go to the washroom, so I went. I just touched the doorknob. I heard a man crying like my whole body just started shivering, and all of a sudden I ran away from there and told my mom about this. We went back in a minute. There was no one there, and we searched everywhere with the flash on. But shockingly, no one there. I already know this place is a bit haunted, because I already had an incident before this in the same place. It was when we pretty much came new. We had just a new home in this new place. There were 2 houses, one was temporary, it was like a hut. We used to live there while the new house was under construction. While it done completely, we shifted to the new one, but the TV was still on the old one. It was on 2009 or 2010, I guess. But I was new to Facebook and I was busy chatting with new friends there, and then somebody just moved the windows again and again. Thought it was my brother who was tricking me. So after some time I heard brother laughing in the old house with the family watching series on TV, and after this incident 2 or 3 days later, my brother witnessed a shadow. It was just moving and went under the bed and shook the whole bed. Next day, a barrage came and fixed the problem. After many years, came again, I guess. Starting off on a confusing foot. My one experience. I'm a 37-year-old man. I'm interested by the supernatural, but I've only ever had one small incident potentially involving it. And this is it. So to set the scene, it was 2004. I was 17 years old and at a friend's house. They had recently gone through some tragic events. I won't go into it too much as I don't want to disrespect them, but there was tragic loss of life of younger family members. Fast forward a few months, I'm at my friend's house. It was a dark winter's evening, and his mom and dad went out somewhere in their car, leaving us with the house to ourselves. Me and my friend were in the room upstairs, probably playing Football Manager. Started being a bit silly, as I was under the impression we were alone in the house, and I guess I just had a sudden burst of energy. His parents were nice people, but always very strict. I let my guard down as I knew that they were out and was doing something silly like jumping up and down on the bed while my friend turns on the game. Can't remember exactly, but it was something across those lines. The door to the room where we were in was pretty open and the lights were off on the upstairs landing. We had a lamp on in the room that we were in, and that was the only one that had light in the area. All of a sudden, I saw a tall, skinny figure went across the landing from one room to another. The figure very much represented his mom's build, so I froze, felt embarrassed that she had witnessed me silly jumping on the bed in the spare room that we were in. I assumed it must have just came home without us noticing. Not unheard of in their house, as it was brand new and not very creaky. A few moments passed and I asked my friend if his parents were back. He replied confidently, "No, I don't think so." Checked out of the windows and the car was still gone. My body went cold, hair stood up. I was so sure that I'd seen somebody. Told my friend and he seemed spooked too. I was worried I would disrespect the recent tragic events, so I didn't go into too much detail with him. I've honestly never felt so spooked about anything in my life. A friend asked me about this again in the next week, so he claimed he too saw something. But as the tragic events were still so raw, we didn't go much further into it. Well, it was just that 100% embarrassed feeling that I had stayed with me, that feeling that his parents had seen me acting a fool, and the emotions of this feeling turning into a Well, what the fuck was that then? It's like the freakiest thing I've ever witnessed, and hopefully ever will. Ghost outside my door. I was living in a mobile home with a friend of mine in 2001. We had moved in within the last few months. The room was in the back of the home at the end of the hallway. My friend usually went out on weekends, couldn't get home until late. But when he did get home, would almost always walk back and knock on my door to see if I was up. That way he could tell me about his outing. One Saturday night I was in my room watching TV. I didn't feel like talking because I was really into what I was watching. So when I heard the door open and the footsteps in the kitchen, I made up my mind to pause what I was watching and just stay quiet. Act like I was already asleep. When he came back and he knocked on the door. After a minute or so, I heard him walking down the hallway toward my room, so I just sat still waiting for him to knock. When the footsteps stopped outside the door, I could hear him breathing. There was no knock. I figured he was just standing there listening for me to make a sound indicating I was still awake so he could knock and tell me about his night. But he just stood outside the door breathing for about a minute, until the sound of the breathing stopped. I was expecting to hear him walk back to the living room and turn on the TV as usual, but there was nothing, no sound at all. I was beginning to get a little bit spooked at this point. Either he was still standing outside the door being as quiet as he could, or I just heard something terrifying. After 5 minutes of no sound, I finally got the courage to open the door and find out what was going on. As soon as I opened the door, I noticed that he wasn't there. There were no lights on and no indication that he was there at all. Looked out to see if the car was there and wasn't. I knew it was impossible for him to go back out and leave me without hearing him, so I could feel my heart pounding. Went back to my room, closed the door. I was no longer concerned with the program I was watching. Instead, I was just waiting for him to get home so I could find out how he somehow managed to leave again without me hearing him. That was the only logical explanation for what I heard, but when he finally did arrive, he told me he was still more than an hour's drive from home when this happened. Haunted Barn. It was the end of the school year in 1980. After that weekend, there were only 3 days of school left till summer vacation. My brothers and I had spent the last few weeks making our new barn into our own playhouse. We had a ping pong and a pool table set up, as well as a room with a card table and a dartboard. A friend was staying overnight with me that night to have fun in the new playhouse. Our plan was to stay up all night going back and forth between games and activities. It was around midnight and we were playing cards at the card table. We were talking about anything and everything. That's when out of nowhere, you hear banging on the wall behind us. We both look over to the source at the same time. There was a door to the outside that was opening about 3 or 4 inches and slamming over and over. It was loud and kept going almost like a minute. When it stopped, my friend and I looked at each other with a look of terror on our face. Got up and ran for the door like it was a race to see who could get out there the fastest. Went into the house to find that everybody was sitting in the living room watching Saturday Night Live. My mom and stepdad swore that no one had gone outside. I was trying to debunk what had just happened as a prank by one of my brothers. When that didn't work out, I grabbed a flashlight and we went back out to see what was outside the door. Thought we might find some tracks or some evidence that somebody was out there. When we got to the outside of the door, we noticed a concrete post leaning against it, holding it shut. I had forgotten about that at the time. It wasn't possible for that door to be open more than an inch. My heart pounded in my chest after seeing this, realizing it couldn't have been done by someone outside pranking us. My friend and I both ran back to the house as fast as we could. Called his mom to pick him up. He was too scared to stay the rest of the night. That barn was the most terrifying and active place I've ever experienced in my life. One of my older brother's friends was hit on the side of his head by a brick that flew out of nowhere at his barn parties. Fortunately, the guy was not seriously injured, but he never really came back to one of my brother's barn parties after that. I hope so. This particular event of the door slamming was truly scary, but the absolutely most terrifying event that ever happened to me was in that barn. You couldn't ask for a more beautiful spring day in 1984. I just started as a drummer in a high school rock band. The night before, my older brother and two friends of ours were practicing our new songs in the barn. I was really excited that they could say that I could be their drummer. I was just dying to get up, practice that day. The only problem with that was the drum set was in the barn and no one else was home. And no one wouldn't even think about going in that barn alone because of the strange and terrifying things that would happen in there, especially when there was no one home. But because I was so excited about getting back to practice, I decided to go ahead and go in. I had a plan to go in the front door, and it was pretty close to the drum set. If anything weird happened, I could get out of there fast. That was the plan anyway. When I got to the door and tried to open it, I noticed that it was off the track and could only open about 5 or 6 inches. That's all right, I thought. I can squeeze through there. So, with a bit of effort, I managed to squeeze myself in. It took some time, though. Great. Now I can get to practice. And practice I did for at least an hour or so. Then I did a rim shot on the snare drum a little too hard and the drum head just split open. Yeah, I'm frustrated to say the least. Threw a tantrum, so to speak, and by throwing a drumstick, it flew into the hay and went on the other side of the barn. Watched it bounce into the back addition upstairs. I calmed down pretty quick since I came to the realization that I have to go up there and get it, but practicing was over till I get a new drum head anyway. So I moved the hi-hat out of the way and began to walk toward the ladder to retrieve the drumstick. I looked up toward where the drumstick landed. It was flying right toward my head. I had to move out of the way or it would have hit me. And remember, I was alone in there. It hit the wall behind me, making a loud noise that startled me on top of already having been terrified by a flying drumstick. Without hesitation, I went straight to the door. Forgot that I had to squeeze in. I was terrified and just wanted out. But I was going to have to take my time to squeeze back out. While doing so, I mistakenly looked over at the drum set. The bass drum mallet that's foot-operated went down like somebody had stepped on it. Seeing this move by itself was bad enough, but it also hit the drum hard enough that I could feel it in my chest. I actually thought that my heart had stopped. So scared that I forced myself through the door, tearing my clothes up and putting big scratches on my back and chest. Once I was out, I ran toward the house about 15 or 20 and then just collapsed. I never practiced in that barn again. Not because of what happened to me, but because the lead guitarist bumped into someone or something in the dark in the night before we got done practicing. There was nobody there and he knew it. Told my mom about it a few days later. Wouldn't even go to get his equipment. My brother and I had to get it for him. This drumstick event is without a doubt, the most terrifying I've ever had in my life. I'll always consider that barn to be beyond haunted and into the realm of evil. Too terrified to scream. When I was 7 or 8 years old, my brother and I, along with some other kids from the neighborhood, were playing hide and seek. It was my turn to seek, so I had to go inside the house to cover my eyes and count to 100. Nobody could see me in there while we were hiding, so I decided to cheat. Went upstairs and started looking out windows to see if everybody was hiding. When we got into my older brother's room to look out the window, I had just got done counting to 100, so I had to get back downstairs pretty fast. Looked out the window really quick and then turned around to head out. Before I had taken 2 steps, the bedroom door slammed shut, which startled me more than anything. Then I felt compelled to look at the attic door, and I was in that room. Heard something moving in there, so I backed up as far away from the door as I could get. That attic was already terrifying to me because of other experiences I've encountered involving it. But my back was now pressed against the wall farthest from the doors. Felt trapped in the room because I didn't want to go near the door that just slammed shut by itself, which happened to be the only exit from the bedroom. I then heard a loud growl come from inside the attic. It instantly felt like my heart stopped. My chest was actually hurting. It's hard to describe that kind of feeling of sheer terror. I wanted to scream, but I was so terrified that I just couldn't. just stood there motionless, waiting for whatever it was to get me. Fortunately, within a few seconds, my brother opened the door and started yelling at me for being in his room. I ran right past him and straight outside. Didn't tell anybody about what just happened. He wouldn't believe me anyway. That was the first time I heard that growl in that house, but not the last. A year or so later, I was in the upstairs bathroom. I heard a growl again, which terrified me and caused me to stop what I was doing and get downstairs. This time, however, I heard the growl a second time as I was quickly making my way back downstairs. It was coming from inside my parents' bedroom, so I stopped and looked in there. Saw my dad was in the bed asleep, and this feeling of relief instantly came over me, realizing I wasn't alone. When the growl happened again, I knew immediately that it was just my dad snoring. I felt so relieved and kind of silly for being scared in the first place. I even wondered if that's what I heard the first time coming from the attic. There was still no explanation for the door slamming shut by itself. Some years later, I went into the bathroom upstairs without really any fear. It had been a while since I'd experienced anything, so I was no longer terrified to go upstairs by myself. While I was doing my business, I heard the growl again. A little scared, but I knew it was probably just Dad in his bed snoring, so I finished my business and started walking to the stairs. It was just to confirm it was him. I looked into his bedroom on my way down. He wasn't there. I was alone upstairs. That feeling of sheer terror came over me instantly again, and I ran downstairs. Fortunately, we moved out of that house not too long after. The Attic. My first paranormal experience. On Easter Sunday, morning of April on the 11th, 1971, I woke up early to an unusually quiet house. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom. There was my parents' bedroom, my older brother's bedroom, and my bedroom, which I shared with my younger brother and the newest member of our family. He was 5 months old, born on November 1970. His crib was right next to my bedroom door, so it would be close to my parents' bedroom door that was just outside my door. I was really excited when I woke up that morning. That was because the night before my mom was talking about the Easter egg hunt and the candy that we would get when we woke up. Us kids also helped decorate the Easter eggs that we would hunt for. I remembered the year before how much fun and rewarding Easter was for us kids, so I couldn't wait for Mom to wake up and bring downstairs for candy. I walked up to the gate that was in the doorway and tried to listen for movement in my parents' bedroom. It would be indicating that Mom was getting ready for us kids, and, well, it was still quiet. So I figured that I was up too early and decided that I should get back into bed and just wait for her. Before getting back in bed, I looked into my infant brother's crib. Saw him laying on his side facing me with one eye opened and the other eye closed. A sight that I still see in my head and in my nightmares to this day. Got back in bed, almost got to sleep when I heard my mom getting up in her room. Decided to keep my eyes closed and let my mom think that she woke me up to give us our Easter baskets and start the egg hunt. She came into my bedroom. Instead of being awoken by an excited mother getting us riled for festivities, I heard her screaming like I've never heard before. My infant brother had passed away in his sleep the night before. Since I was too young to really understand what was happening, I was thinking about the candy and the egg hunt. Mom was absolutely hysterical, understandably, which made this morning the most traumatic event of my entire life. It was really difficult to see Mom in that condition because the trauma of that morning blocked my mind from this memory for a long time. Upon remembering it later in my life, I realized it was probably the cause of what was to come in that house. Several weeks later, I woke up to see that I was the last one to wake up that morning. I was alone upstairs. Instead of yelling for Mom to come and get me, I felt compelled to go into my older brother's room. His room had a little attic door to the wall, which happened to be open. That was a bit unusual. I'd never seen that door left open before. I started walking toward the door to close it, and it just slammed shut by itself. It was loud and startled me. It wasn't scary to me since I'd seen the doors move automatically before at a grocery store. No idea at the time it was something to be scared of. Mom had heard the door slamming from downstairs, came running upstairs to see if I was okay. Told her what happened, but she didn't believe me. She said doors don't open and close by themselves. I knew better, though. She couldn't convince me that I didn't see what I just saw. This event was the first of many strange occurrences that would happen to me in that house before we moved out. Now I truly believe it was my brother talking to me the only way that he could. Ouija board in haunted childhood home. At the end of May 1987, while my parents were on vacation, I was taking care of the haunted house I'd lived in from 79 to 85. By this time, the poltergeist activity decreased to almost nothing, but I was still scared to be in that house alone, especially at night. I called a friend of mine and asked him if he would mind staying there with me, which, while my parents were gone. Apparently his parents were going to be gone too, so it worked out. I had told him quite a few stories about the activity in the house and that barn, so I used the possibility of the paranormal encounter to sort of lure him into staying. He, fortunately for him, had never experienced anything he would consider paranormal before, but was still interested and not skeptical, so we agreed to stay that night. While I was waiting for him to arrive, my brother called to see if I was going to be staying there that night so he could hang out with his friends. I confirmed that I was. I was also telling him that I was having my friend over to possibly have his first paranormal experience. My brother thought that was a good idea, so he decided to mention that to his friends to see if they wanted to join in for the experience of their own. One of his friends had a Ouija board. Thought that was a great place to try it out. They agreed. My brother arrived with his two friends first. He walked around outside telling his friends about experiences that we had there in the barn. One of his friends was a skeptic, so he wasn't believing anything me or my brother were talking about. The other was like my friend. He hadn't experienced anything in his life, but still had an open mind. While we were talking, my friend finally arrived, so I went to his car to greet him. He had his girlfriend with him, so I asked him if he was still planning on staying the night. He said yeah, as long as his girlfriend could stay as well. I didn't mind, as long as she was aware of my reason for having him stay. I told her that strange things may happen that might be scary to somebody who never had these experiences before. She was also a skeptic, so she agreed to stay without really saying anything. While my brother and his friends were still outside, I took my friend and his girlfriend upstairs to show them where they could sleep. After showing them, I started telling stories about the house to prepare them for what could possibly happen during the night. The only thing I was expecting would happen was maybe the attic door would shake and make noise like it had done almost every night while I was living here. Or we went to the attic, so we could show them, well, what was in there when we're still talking about past experiences in the barn and the house. There was a stack of old encyclopedias on the floor that was in sort of a state of disarray with, So I just picked one up from the floor, placed it on the top of the stack, and then straightened up the stack while finishing my stories of past experiences. Afterwards, I went back downstairs to see what my brother was doing. My friend stayed upstairs with his girlfriend so they could be alone. When I got downstairs, I saw that they had already set up the Ouija board on the table, even had a few candles on the table around it. The table was in the dining room at the bottom of the stairs. Closed the stairway door, sat down in the empty chair in front of me, facing away from the door. My brother and his two friends were already sitting in the other chairs. We lit the candles, put our fingers on the planchette, and began asking questions. The planchette was moving with all of her hands on it, answering our questions. I wasn't moving it, but I did think somebody in our group was. I didn't believe Ouija boards were anything more than a novelty. While playing with the board, we heard somebody walking on the stairs. It caused all four of us to look at the stairway door. I didn't think anything of it since my friend and his girlfriend were still upstairs. I just figured they were coming down. And after a little time, we hadn't opened the door. So I opened the door, so I wasn't there. I then went up and asked him if he had gone down the stairs. He told me that him and his girlfriend hadn't moved from the couch that they were sitting on. He told me that he thought one of us were coming upstairs because they heard it also. 6 people heard something walking on the stairs when there was no one on the stairs. My brother's skeptical friend was getting really spooked after that. We had to sort of convince him not to leave, and his other friend was intrigued like it was the coolest thing we'd experienced up to that point. My brother and I were used to that sort of thing, so it didn't faze us at all. After convincing his friend to stay, we went back to playing with the Ouija board. I was answering questions again, and I still thought somebody was moving that planchette. Then the intrigued friend asked whatever was answering to just put out one of the candles. Within 5 seconds, one of the candles just burned out. There was no moving air in the room, plus all the other candles were still burning without any motion indicating moving air. The spooked, skeptical friend screamed, started running for the door, still screaming. The other friend followed him, and my brother after that. I shouldn't have been, but I was laughing at the guy's reaction, even though it was spooky. I never expected a big guy like him to scream like that. I went outside to find my brother's friends getting in the car to leave. I said, we can't stop without saying goodbye on the Ouija board just in case the superstition is true. My brother's friends were not willing to go back in the house, though, so my brother and I went in and said goodbye. They left right after that, without the Ouija board. I went back inside, blew out the remaining candles. Then I went upstairs to tell my friends and his girlfriend what just happened, since I knew they had just, heard the screaming. We sat upstairs talking until nighttime. Nothing happened until after midnight. That's when the attic door began moving. And like I mentioned before, this was a pretty usual occurrence in that house, so I was used to it. My friend's girlfriend was getting really scared by this, though. She didn't believe in things like this could happen, and here it was, happening. It took a bit of convincing to get her to stay, but she did at that point. The attic door was shaking and making noise the whole time. After a bit of time, there was a loud noise that came from inside the attic that sounded like something being dragged across the floor. Then the sound of knocking from within. Once again, we had to talk to his girlfriend into not leaving even when the door rattling and knocking was still going on. After a few minutes, there was a loud thud. It sounded like somebody had dropped a book flat into a wooden floor. That was it for his girlfriend. There was no talking her way into staying now. She ran downstairs with us right behind her. Told my friend she would be back to pick him up in the morning. She left. Went back inside, slept downstairs. When we got up, I just had to look in the attic to see where that loud noise came from. When I looked in, the first thing I noticed was a stack of encyclopedias was no longer straightened up, and the one I picked up was right back on the floor. I can't say for sure if any of this was brought on by the Ouija board, but that was more occurrences in one day witnessed by more people than there had ever been in that house before. Shadow figures in haunted home. When my family first moved into our new house in the country, I was happy about finally getting out of our previous house that was haunted. Fortunately, it wasn't even a week of being there before the activities started in our new house. I still remember the first event that started the whole thing. I was in the house alone while everybody else was outside. I had to run out and ask my mom something, so I went through the kitchen and on my way to the back door. The faucet wasn't running when I went past it on my way out, but as soon as I came in, I found it running full blast. Not just the cold water was turned on, but the hot as well. This was an event that happened several times to everyone in the house. Also, the dishwasher would start itself in the middle of the night, which us kids were blamed for at first, until it started right in front of my stepdad and I. We called a repairman to check it out since it happened so frequently at first. There was nothing wrong with the switch, and the repairman showed us that it was impossible for the thing to start itself. But we as a family talked about these little events in general conversations from time to time. But there was another event that we were pretty much all experiencing that we didn't talk about, because it was kind of questionable. We'd been seeing what looked like someone walking past the window of the house in the corner of our eye almost daily. Felt kind of stupid saying anything since, I never saw it while I was looking at the window. When I ran out to see who it was, there's no one there. Since no one else had mentioned seeing this, I had the idea that maybe I was the only one who saw it. That was until after we had been there about 8 months. We were all sitting in the living room watching TV when I saw someone go one by the window. I looked over that window and there was nothing there. But just as I got my eye on that window, the figure went past the other window in the room. I immediately noticed my mom and stepdad looking over at that window at the same time. I knew right then that they had seen it too, so I asked if they saw someone going past the window. They both said yes, so my brother and I went running outside to see if we could see who it was. There's no one out there. When I came back, I opened it up and told everybody that I'd been seeing that the whole time. At that point, everybody came out and said that they saw it too, which gave me a feeling of relief. At least I wasn't crazy. We all had been seeing it regularly, but were too afraid to say anything for some reason. Same reason I didn't, probably. Shadow people were seeing the corner of our eyes continued for several years. Even after we moved in, and then it just stopped out of the blue for a while. My mom told me later, after I was out of the house for a while, that she was occasionally seeing it again when I was bringing it up, but it was just another one of those weird things that happened in the house that we all sort of had to get used to. The boy. When I was 5, I'm from Australia, so 11 or 12-year-old, me and my friends would occasionally hang out, and she was a few houses away. We were talking about how she just recently got a Ouija board for her birthday. I laughed it off until she showed it to me, asked if I wanted to play with it. I didn't really know much about it, as my mother was against that type of stuff, so I agreed that we just sat down in my driveway and started playing it, just laughing as we didn't really believe it. That was until it moved to spell out move. I panicked a little again, but again, I didn't believe in that stuff, so I kind of thought she was moving it to scare me. After a while, got called to go home. I just went inside. That night around 7:30, I'd gotten ready for bed, as my mom and I used to watch a movie before that night. We didn't really, as it was a school night. She was busy cleaning, so I just went to sleep. The middle of the night, I was woke by, nothing unusual. I normally do, but I had a weird feeling. I glanced and saw my door was open, and I would always close it, as we had a bird called Georgie. He lived in the kitchen. Our kitchen had a cage and a separate lounge area, so it was pretty hygienic. It was only a little 2-bedroom house. He would normally fly in, do his business. He could get out if he really wanted to. Mom didn't mind opening it at night so he could do whatever he wanted. In my room, if the door wasn't closed, I stepped out, went to the toilet, shut my door as I got into my bed, closed my eyes, but as soon as I did, I heard a clear little boy's laugh. Opened my eyes, kind of scared to hear something had broke in, and maybe my mom had forgot to lock the door. Sat up and rubbed my eyes, and then a shot of light raced past the door. The door was open, nothing was in the hallway after that. But I remember clearly shutting my door and got up, went to the door, but I heard the laugh again. It was closer. It's like it wasn't coming from the lounge room, it was coming from the kitchen where the bird was. All I could think of was my bird's going to be hurt. So I walked straight to the lounge room. Mom always had left a knife on the shelf in the area. It was always sketchy. So I grabbed it and headed to the kitchen. Stood a boy. It wasn't anyone I'd seen. He had brown curly hairs. He turned around. He had my bird in his hand. I told him to get away from the bird, and he smiled and disappeared into thin air. In the morning, Mom had gotten up before me to get lunch ready. It was her way of being busy. She screamed. I woke up from it and raced to her. She was in the doorway of the kitchen staring at where I had seen the boy. When I asked her what's wrong, she pointed out that there was my bird on the floor with blood everywhere. It was a bite-sized bite that was missing from him. I haven't told my mom, nor will I, as I don't talk to her. Laughing and giggling would appear every night for about 5 or 6 months. But I'd never see that boy again. Kept a knife under my pillow for about maybe 6 months until he didn't come back. To this day, I still get paranoid about locking my door at night and still won't play any paranormal games. I'm so sorry about your bird. It's horrible. Creepy true story. When I was about 8 years old, my mom and dad just got back together. Moved into a farmhouse. It was old and it was pretty huge. We had a pet pig and chickens. The pig would stay inside and sleep in a dog's bed in the lounge room. I don't remember much, but my mom and dad still tell me to this day about it. My dad had gotten a day off. He had had a bad back and needed to rest it off. So everybody else was at school or work, and my sister was at her mom's, and my uncles was staying with us for a while. He had gone to work, and my dad woke up to footsteps that sounded like somebody not picking up their boots. Dad called out to my uncle as he worked as a carpenter. He had big boots, but no response. Dad got up and checked every room, yelling my uncle's name. Again, no response. No one was there. A few days had passed, and my dad and mom were cooking dinner, and my sister was in the toy room. My uncle was with my mom and dad. I ran out of my room, and my room had a pretty big window that looked over the front veranda, wrapped around the whole house. I went to Mom and said, "There's an old man on the porch looking in my window." Mom looked at Dad and ran to the front grabbing a knife. We live in Australia and didn't even have any guns. My dad grabbed me and my sister, locked us in the bathroom, and walked to the front door to see where Mom was, and there's no one where they were looking everywhere. Even called the police. But nothing hearing the stories, and still creeps me out to this day. A little bit weird. Apparition that's been with my family since I was born. So I, an 18-year-old female, my sister, a 15-year-old female, and my mom, a 49-year-old female, have all noticed this apparition of a woman with jet black hair, dirty white dress, and I'm not sure if she's faceless or if I've just never seen her face. She's pretty tall. I'd say 5'9" or maybe 6. For as long as me and my sister can remember, this woman has always been in all of her family homes that we've moved in and out of. Seems like she's limited to certain rooms. Like, for example, back in 2019, I was asleep in my bedroom. My sister was in the living room facing my room and her room in the bathroom. She saw her come out of her room, go to the doorway, and stop. She was just looking at my closed door like she wasn't able to get in. She then went past my sister through our living room toward our dining room kitchen. However, upon reaching the hardwood floor and entrance to that area of the house, she stopped again. Just like she couldn't go in. This woman could stand in the doorway of rooms while me and my sister played, never causing harm, just watching when her mom wouldn't be there. She didn't make me uncomfortable until I got older and realized it wasn't normal for her to be there. Yeah. Three strange things that happened in our apartment in or around 2014. I recently came across the subreddit. Thought I might share my wife's and my stories, some strange things that happened several years ago. My only real first-hand encounter with possibly paranormal happenings. It's a long read and a crazy story if you care to hear it, but I promise you it's entirely true. Before my wife and I got married in 2016, we lived together for a few years. In an apartment in a small Pennsylvania town where I grew up and went to high school. The apartment was a house that had been divided by levels, with the lower having access to a dirt floor basement for storage needs, the upper floor having access to the attic. We lived on the second floor up until about 2015. That's when the lower and larger half became available, and at that point we moved downstairs. Wasn't a father then, but I still appreciated the dad joke of telling people we were really moving up in the world. Indeed. The strange things that happened while we lived there all occurred on the second floor. Nothing ever really happened while we were occupying the first floor. I've been very much into photography since I was in high school, especially portrait photography. And in the first 2 years or so of our relationship, I managed to photograph, edit, and frame 2 separate portraits of either of us. Similar angles, sort of a half-profile shot, if you will, with our faces turned 45 degrees relative to the camera. Neither of us looking directly at the camera, and of course smiling. I got 14 by 20 frames and mounted 8 by 10 prints in some black mats. The images themselves were black and white. The frames were heavy, so I used heavier than necessary little J-hook type hangers. First hung them on an interior wall of our upstairs apartment, so that in the images we were facing each other, albeit with my portrait a few inches higher than my wife's. We liked the aesthetic. On the least 3 occasions, my wife's portrait fell off the wall, while mine remained firmly put. It always happened while we were in the apartment. Nothing ever really significant was happening to my knowledge. Certainly nothing that would have caused any vibrations. The building was about 30 feet off the road. Didn't get much traffic, especially not any trucks or anything big. First time it happened, I figured I still hadn't, used a large enough hook. But it was intact and not bent to any degree, and the third time her portrait fell, we swapped them side to side. Neither fell off the wall from that point on. So, sometime after that, I started a new job. That was an aircraft engine manufacturing plant. There was a union, great benefits, and much better pay. I was to be a probationary employee for 60 days, after which point it would be almost impossible to be fired or let go. But in that 60-day window, I was warned by other employees that if I put so much as a toe out of line, I'd be told to go home, not to come back the next day. As you might not expect, I was very nearly let go on my second day of work for being almost late. On the evening of the very first day at that new job, a dear friend of ours invited us to a backyard cookout he was hosting. My wife and I both attended. We might have had 2 beers or lemonades or twisted teas or whatever. Plenty of food, and after a few hours thanked her friend and went home. I believe it's important to note that we were typically fairly heavy drinkers, had something of a tolerance built up, to where 2 beers would have done little if anything to our functioning. Several hours later at around 4 a.m., I woke to the sound of shattering glass somewhere in our apartment. The very first thing I noticed was that my then-girlfriend wasn't beside me in the bed. I heard vague yelling and shouting, climbed out of the bed, opened our bedroom door, looked out into our dining room. Past that, our kitchen, the main access for our apartment, with a set of stairs that led down to the yard. Flashlights were aimed in my face. I heard someone ask my name, and it was a police officer, who I, quickly as I could possibly say, "Yes, that's me," had my hands at the small of my back and in handcuffs. He wasted no time in marching me over the doors, like my bare feet, right over the sill. That's where he shattered the window so he could get in, continued walking me down the stairs into the yard. Nothing but my boxer shorts and an undershirt. There were 2 other cops waiting there. I don't remember the conversation verbatim, but they basically thought I had beat my then-girlfriend. The officer who walked me down grabbed each of my hands and inspected my knuckles, probably thinking he'd find blood or bruises. They asked if I'd been drinking and administered a breathalyzer, which was too low to register anything. I came to learn the officer who retrieved me had been forcefully knocking on my door for more than 10 minutes, but hadn't been able to hear him, so he broke the glass to get in. One of the officers would tell me really much of anything helpful, just that my girlfriend had always been taken via ambulance, not always, but she had indeed been taken via ambulance to the emergency room. She was then still working as a waitress at a restaurant. She had brought a wad of bills home and placed them on our dresser a few nights before. My first thought was that we had been the victims of a burglary or robbery. I asked if one of the officers would go up with me and see if the money was still there. One of them nodded. They went back up only to find the money undisturbed. Plain sight, no less. Shortly after that, the officers left, and I quickly got dressed and got to my car to drive to the hospital. When I found my then-girlfriend in one of the bays of the ER, I was horrified to see her face mostly still covered in blood. Over the next few minutes, she filled me in what was happening. She apparently had sleptwalked, getting out of the bed, moving around to my side where there was a window overlooking the bare metal roof and the awning of the front porch below. She apparently managed to take out the metal window screens. Keep in mind, we had previously put an air conditioner in that window and had a hell of a time getting the screen to move up, let alone completely out of the window. And without waking me, climbed out onto the roof. It wasn't raining that night, but my guess is that as soon as she got onto that roof, her hands had nothing to grab onto and she fell face forward to the ground. about 20 or so feet below. She ended up tearing her septum clean through. Had to get stitches immediately. There were scrapes and cuts on her hands and forearms, and she had a headache from what I remember, but not too much else. All of the ER staff believed she had been sleeping. The fact that she had been asleep may have prevented her from incurring more serious injuries, like a broken neck or a spinal injury. A few days after getting the stitches, her mother took her to a plastic surgeon to straighten her nose back out. It was a little crooked and the stitches hadn't even been done properly. My wife had a severe allergy to medical tape and adhesive. Despite telling the plastic surgeon and his assistants this, they fitted her face with a cast with a heavy amount of tape. Hours after leaving the facility, her face swelled up to the point of where she could barely breathe. She looked absolutely terrible, very much unrecognizable. Back to the ER we went. Over the next few weeks, she filled in the details of the story. Parts I didn't know. When she woke up on the ground, she was scared and disoriented, and unfortunately, we hadn't hidden a key outside her door, so she banged on the door for half an hour and I couldn't hear her. She got into her recycling bin and threw plastic bottles and cans up at her bedroom window, hoping she'd wake me. A neighbor had seen or heard her and called 911 and came over with a blanket. She was only in her underwear. The police came shortly after the ambulance got there and they questioned my wife but didn't believe her. Waited until the ambulance left before they attempted to wake or contact me. It was probably a few months after the incident, but my wife eventually told me, and only me, of something that had been bothering her for the whole ordeal. She told me she had a dream that night where she was sitting on the roof or awning, and someone or something was telling her it was okay to jump, and that it wouldn't hurt. She remembers not wanting to jump in the dream, and of course the next thing she remembers is waking up on the ground. The odd thing that happened is something I unfortunately can't place definitively in the timeline of the other events. I believe it was after her sleepwalking incident, but it could have been before. I woke up one night early in the morning in bed, and as soon as I was conscious, I saw what I thought was my then-girlfriend walking through the doorway of our bedroom, into the dining room. Thought it was my girlfriend, as this person had long dark hair and the height seemed identical, although they were wearing a white nightgown, which I don't believe she had, but at any rate, I was awake enough to believe that I'd seen her walking out the door. I asked, "Where are you going?" Being rather startled and confused, my girlfriend was still in bed with me. She's on the other side of the pillow or two with some bunched up blankets, and she said sleepily, "I'm right here." I was really weirded out by that. Told a few friends afterward that I normally could have chalked it up to being still asleep or a hallucination of some sort, but I was too awake and conscious to believe that. I'd definitely seen a figure that resembled my girlfriend, and it was walking out of her room. I remember at the time, and especially after a sleepwalking incident, that we tried to research any history of the house. Couldn't find anything. The landlords were very sweet people. We never wanted to tell them any details of these things. They, of course, found out about the sleepwalking incident as they'd replaced the door, but they were more pissed about the cop walking over to the broken glass of my bare feet than the fact that they had to buy a new door. I do remember at one point my wife's mother suggesting we burn sage in the apartment, but I can't remember if we ever did or didn't. I don't think we've since tried to explain what happened, other than a weird string of coincidences. We don't talk about it really at all anymore. My wife's nose is a little worse for wear. She has worse congestion, and one of her nostrils is smaller than it used to be. And unfortunately, her surgery and recovery caused her to be late for her next semester of college. She dropped out, worked minimum wage jobs for a while, and more recently, she went back to school and graduated with an RN this past May. She just started working at a local hospital about a month ago. That was on labor and delivery ward. Of course, we got married back in 2016, and now we have 3 awesome children that amaze us. The only thing I still think about from time to time is how things would have gone if she had broken her neck, which I think is much more than possible at the height that she fell from. Would I have been put in jail, and for how long? Would her family have believed me? Not the type of man that would hit, beat, or abuse their wife, but could people come to any other conclusion? I'll never forget running through the plant in the morning after my wife's sleepwalking incident. Actually, I was more so bolting through it. It must have been a sight to see a grown man running in steel toes at 7 a.m. Everyone started out as janitors at the plant, and another janitor, a sweet middle-aged lady, had been showing me around the first day. My eyes were so wide when I slid into the janitor's room that morning that may as well have been golf balls. Bell rang and I started walking to the maintenance area a short distance away. That's where all the janitors and maintenance personnel stood for the morning announcements. She whispered to me all along the way, "Why are you cutting it so close? You gotta get here on time." Started to tell her why I was late, but I stopped because why would anybody believe me in that situation? Girlfriend has attached a shadow entity to me. Please help. Whether my eyes are open or closed, I see blue eye that fades away and never fully reveals itself. What is this eye? How do I get rid of it? It's always the same eye, partially hidden but always present. This eye also tries to deceive me by showing me what I want to see during meditation. But you see, it's been 72 hours. The same thing is still here. Background. No one will really believe this until you're living it, but I met this girl 6 months ago. She has bipolar disorder and sometimes uses names to describe her higher self. Bit of new age stuff, but she constantly yelled about shadow people following her and would randomly claim that she would come back from the dead. Obviously didn't take it seriously. I lucid dream every single night. I've had sleep paralysis for 14 years, but I've never seen a demon. Turns out I didn't need to be in sleep paralysis to experience something bizarre. I was microdosing DMT, and no, not me, her. I watched her take it. Her black hair literally turned red, including her eyebrows and eyelids. Didn't believe it was real, just hallucination. The process was repeatable 12 consecutive times with the same result. Kept it to myself. When I asked my two friends to describe what they saw, they described the identical thing. Finally, I asked her if she knew. That's when her face, I swear to God, transformed from a beautiful woman to like a gremlin ogre. It smiled and said, "What? You don't want to fuck anymore?" I said, "I don't. This is disgusting." The ogre then collapsed. The red changed back to black and she woke up normal, asking what happened. I don't know, but I think we need to protect ourselves from demons. We went to bed and now the eye described has been attached ever since. And of course she said she did something, and of course she did something to watch over me when I was asleep. When I told her I don't want it, she said it wasn't her anymore and is evil. Can't help me, but she described it exactly. No, I don't trust her. And I don't trust her for you. Story time. So one night, me and my sister and her friends went to this carnival. It was in another town about an hour from home. We had a good time. We decided to go get food in another town that was a little bit further. So we're pretty far out in the country. We was driving on a fairly busy road around 12 a.m. That's when I saw this woman walking along the road with a reflective vest on. She had some weird shit on her head and she looked like a squid, but it looked like a bunch of clothes just on her head and we all noticed it and just like what the fuck, but we did brush it off. Now, we're on the way home. My sister's taken a long way for some reason. We're starting to get out of town, onto the back roads. If you know anything about the back roads in Tennessee, Appalachia, then you know. Well, anyways, it's been about 20 minutes since we'd seen that girl. And we see this guy wearing the same shit walking on the same side of the road. Wasn't a straight shot either. Been like we're driving. He's wearing the same shit reflective vest and we started getting creeped out. The only thing we kept saying was just like, what the fuck? 20 minutes later, we keep seeing these people. Started really freaking us the fuck out when we realized these people were walking on small, back roads, no flashlights in the middle of the woods, middle of nowhere. Some were women. What kind of girl would do that? Anyways, we started, actually talking about it. That's because it's weird. My sister took a turn and we'd seen a bunch of them walking in a line. They had reflective vests on and backpacks and this weird shit on their head. I don't know what it was. Couldn't make it out, but one of my sister's friends yelled out, "The fuck are you?" Eloquent. We zoomed, bro. But we saw where they were walking. I looked over and they had all these wooden chairs lined up under a canopy. It was just sitting, no lights. It's 1 a.m. and the only reason I was able to see them was from our headlight. And we got the fuck out and was driving for a bit and we saw this police car with a reflective vest hanging up in his car. It's probably normal, but them people weren't for sure. It was so creepy having to drive past them, especially on a small road in the middle of the woods. But let me know what y'all think about this. What did I see? So I, a 27-year-old female, I've lived in my current home for a little over a year and a half. It's just what my wife and I were looking for. A nice home on 5 acres to start a little hobby farm. A little garden, chicken, goats, a horse or two. So our first night in the home, my brother-in-law, 17-year-old male, wife, 25-year-old female, stayed up late putting together the couch and the bed, so we could all sleep that night. We've only been at this house maybe 4 or 5 times, so we didn't really know the house or the land very well. It was almost 2 a.m. at this point. Decided to let the dogs out before bed. We're so excited about this home for our dogs. For the first time, the entire 5 acres is fenced in. Going from maybe half of an acre at the rental we lived in prior. So our dogs, Roman, a Great Dane, Ray, a Corgi, and Stella, a Black Lab. And when I say Black Lab, I mean black as night. We had to get a reflective harness or have her wear a blinking collar if she went outside in the dark. She would just disappear. So we're outside looking out. We're just talking. Decided to call the dogs back in because we couldn't see them anymore. So we tried calling them. Didn't hear them or see them. So my wife did the common dog whistle. Basically, as soon as she did it, someone or something whistled back. We all said at the same time, "What was that?" I know now never to whistle at night. So let me explain this. We lived on a dead-end street. The house hasn't really lived there the whole year. The house hasn't lived there the whole year and a half that we lived in our home. Just recently started doing an estate sale. Our neighbor to the left of the house is empty. The house to our right isn't even on our street. We just shared a fence line. He's a sweet old man. We have someone that lives behind us. Other than that, we don't have anyone around. The dogs came running back, and that was it for a little bit. My wife worked at the same company, same days off, just different shifts. I'm on nights, she's on graves. Our shifts are also 12 hours long. So little things would happen, like sounds around the home, motion lights would go off, things like this. I adjust the sensitivity on them, so we'd have to kind of struggle to pick up a Great Dane. We'd hear bird noises in the middle of the night, or it'd be completely silent. So as I was laying in bed about to fall asleep, my dogs wouldn't stop barking. I mean going insane. I just decided to let them out, hoping to let them chase off whatever they had heard. They'd bark at like a mouse walking across the street, I swear. So after a few minutes, I decided to walk out on the porch. I wanted to call them so I could go back to sleep. Since I was basically asleep, I forgot to put Stella's blinking collar on her. So after a little bit, I tried to find a flashlight. This gets their attention. They usually come in better. but unfortunately I couldn't find it, so I had to use my iPhone. Well, it's pretty much useless if you want to see more than 5 feet in front of you. So I tried to shine around to see if I could see any of them. So I started on my left and worked my way to the right. I saw reflective eyes. For how tall it seemed to be, I thought it was my Great Dane. So I said, "Roman, let's go, get your butt in the house." Still just staring at me. Then it blinked, still standing there. I said in a stern voice, "Roman, come inside." I heard something jump on our wood patio from behind me. It was all 3 of my dogs. I looked back to where I saw the eye. The eyes went up maybe 2.5 feet upwards, dispersed, and following was something big, running and fast. So location-wise, I'm on the West Coast, a Native American. They were present when I bought the home. Bears we don't have, but very, very, very uncommon. We do have mountain lions, but more common than bears, but still uncommon. I won't even type the name out of fear of giving it power. Any advice on what I saw and what to do? My advice is to come back tomorrow. See ya.